Hello random people on the internet, this is Steve. I am an English teacher and I know a lot about C1 exams. That is why you should be watching this video, in which we move on to the listening exam. We are going on to the Cambridge C1 Listening exam, starting with part 1. Point of all these videos is we look at each part of the exam, we look at the format, we look at especially the skills you need, the typical types of questions you'll have to answer and how you can answer them. We do an example together, we do some activities together, then you can go away and keep practicing by yourself, knowing how you need to practice, knowing what you need to listen for. So this is like your introduction class to the listening, when you've already got a good level, you're doing C1, but it's like an introduction class, teaching you how to think about the listening so you can go on and practice by yourself. That's the whole point of this video and all the other videos on the Cambridge exam that I'm doing. Right, so part 1. What is part 1? Well, it looks like this. You have 3 extracts, meaning 3 audios that you listen to, and 2 questions for each one. So 6 questions, 6 marks. It's always a conversation between a man and a woman, so you can tell their voices apart and to say who is speaking and who says what. And a little bit tricky, the answer could be anywhere, as in it could be this question and this question, it could be right at the start, right at the end. 100% attention the whole time, thinking of both questions, keeping both questions in your mind. They're normally in order, meaning question 1 comes first, but that's not 100% at all. You will listen to extract 1 twice, then extract 2 twice, then extract 3 twice. So extract 1, and 2 questions. Extract 2, 2 questions, 3, 2 questions. That's how you do it. Very clear. Moving on to the practicalities, the common question types. If you do lots of these exams, you will start to notice some patterns. And when you start to notice patterns, it should get a bit easier. Question types like, what do they agree on? The 2 speakers agree that, what do they agree about? So when you start thinking about this question, you can start thinking about how to answer it. Okay. The purpose or intent of what they're saying. Like, what are they praising something? Are they criticizing something? Are they explaining something? Depending on what they say, you can start to think about, okay, what exactly are they trying to do when they talk? That's another question type. Next one, a bit simpler, opinions, as in what do they like the most? What do they dislike? What do they think is most important? And so on. And then the last one that is a bit complicated is, why do they give an example? So quite often they will mention a study that was carried out. They will tell an anecdote about when they were young. They will talk about a film they saw. Why? What is the point they are making with this example? What is their objective in using it? That's another common question type. Obviously, there's a few other types of questions because the exam, C1 level, you're supposed to be able to understand pretty much anything that is spoken in English. But these are common ones that are repeated, so they're good ones to practice. We're going to start in a slightly easier way by thinking in a bit more detail about what the text says and how it tells us the answer. So let's start with this agreeing or disagreeing question. We have 2 people talking about learning languages, and they agree that people wanting to learn a new language must have a talent, be prepared to work hard, be ready to take risks. Okay, well, here's what they say. So do you think the key to good language learning is to be naturally gifted? Gifted, talent, okay. Well, it certainly helps. And it's not a gift we all have. I'm fairly outgoing and uninhibited, and that helps too. I mean, you won't get very far if you're scared of making a fool of yourself. What's essential though is application. Just getting stuck into it and making the effort. Well, that's the key to learning almost anything. I mean, you don't learn other things like maths or tennis just by being uninhibited. Listen again if you want, go back 30 seconds and listen to my wonderful performance again. But it should be fairly clear what the answer is when we go like this, when you can read it, when you can think about the question in detail, because A, have a talent, this is a distraction. She says, do you think it's important? And he says, it helps. Did they agree? I'm not sure they agreed. They didn't agree. She asked a question and he said it helps. That's not them agreeing that you must have a talent. So no, it's mentioned, but it's not that. B, he says it's essential to have application, to get stuck in, to make the effort. These are all synonyms for working hard. And she says, well, that's the key. That is referring to working hard. So she agrees. So B's looking good. Could it be C? What do they say about C? Well, the man says it is, you won't get far if you're not scared of making a fool of yourself. He says, you must take risks. But she says, no, you can't learn things just by being uninhibited, like maths or tennis, for example. And the same, by implication, the same for languages. So it's not C. The answer is B. He says, you need to work hard, get stuck in, make the effort. She says, well, that's the key to learning anything, by implication, including languages. So it's B. They agree you must be prepared to work hard. How do you get the answer to these questions in general? Well, it's all about identifying when they say the same thing using slightly different words. They will normally both say the same thing, or one will say it and the other will say exactly, I couldn't agree more. Although normally they won't say something so simple. They'll say it in a bit more of a, they're not just going to say, I agree, you're right. They're going to say, well, of course, or they're going to say something that implies agreement. So it's about identifying when they say the same thing. That's the important thing to be looking out for, listening out for there. Next question type is where we could talk about the purpose or the intent of the extract in general. Here our example is, two people talk traveling on a river. Imagine the situation, as always. How does the woman react to what the man says? Takes offense, suggests alternatives, reprimands him. Reprimands, if you don't know that word, you're in a bit of trouble, because that's a word on the C1 exam, and you need to know the words for the questions. It means tells him off. Says, you shouldn't do that, that's very bad. I'm reprimanding you, I'm telling you off. Well, what do they say? Don't count on it. If I'd known about the mosquitoes, I'd never have signed up for this. But none of that would matter if, there were rapids, white water, crocodiles and panoramic landscapes. I mean, we're just getting bitten on a muddy river closed in by dull, monotonous little trees. It's not as if we had to come here. There were lots of other places we could have gone if only we'd realised. Oh, Don, if only you'd put on some repellent. And if you'd please just stop moaning for a while, perhaps we could start enjoying ourselves a bit. Just think what a lovely change this is from city life. So how does the woman react? We have to understand the general meaning of what she says here. And let's again think about the options. She doesn't sound offended. She's not saying, oh, how dare you say something like that? I can't believe you would say that. That's an outrage. That's an insult. Offense? No. Does she suggest alternative activities? She suggests putting on some insect repellent, but I don't think we can call that an alternative activity to going on the rapids on the river. Not really. So this leaves us with C. Is C correct? She is criticizing him. So if only you'd stop. Please stop moaning. Then we could enjoy ourselves. She's reprimanding, criticizing him, telling him off, saying stop doing that, for moaning, complaining, because she's saying you should enjoy yourself more. So in general, what she's doing is reprimanding him, as hopefully you can understand from what she's saying. These kind of general ones, they take some practice. It's to understand the general meaning of what people are saying. Often process of elimination can help, but hopefully you can see why C is the best answer there. Next question type. Well, as I said, identifying the intent. They could be explaining something, describing something, suggesting, and so on. In this case, reprimanding, criticizing, another possibility. Next question type. This one's a bit more straightforward, I hope. Opinions. We have two people talking about their gap year, where you stop working for a year and go and travel in Australia. The biggest issue the boy faced: accommodation, long journeys, getting work. Okay, so the biggest issue, meaning the biggest problem. He's going to say he had a big problem doing what? What does he say? Shall I try and do the Australian accent? No, because he's not Australian, is he? He's on a gap year in Australia. He's from the exact same village as me, so he has the exact same accent as me. It's a massive country and surprisingly pricey. I took the bus between cities. Flying really defeats the objects of travel. So much of the country's character is revealed in those vast distances of pure nothingness. I did struggle to make ends meet. I earned a bit doing bits and pieces of work here and there. It wasn't easy to come by. Rather than pay high rent, I stayed in basic hostels. But it was good. I kept bumping into the same people, all on a tight budget, of course. Okay, a few distractions, talking about budget, pricey, talking about money, talking about hostels, accommodation, talking about the bus and the plane, about travel. But A, he stayed in hostels, but it wasn't a problem. He says it was good. So this was not an issue, finding accommodation is not a problem. B, the long bus journeys. No, he says he prefers the bus. What he doesn't like is flying, because then you can't really see the country. He actually liked seeing all the country on the bus. So C, getting work, earning a bit, getting work. We know he's talking about this. Earning a bit refers to getting work. And he says it wasn't easy to come by, meaning find. To come by something is to find something. So it wasn't easy to find work, to get work, to pay for his costs. So C is the best answer. Hopefully that one's a bit easier. It's just identifying which one he actually says is the worst, the best, the most important, and so on, by using these typical tricks of vocabulary and phrases like earn. Okay, we're talking about work. Then you know you're listening. Wasn't easy. It was a big issue, because it wasn't easy. It was an issue. It was a problem. Okay. So identifying positives, negatives, and nuances of opinion, which, as I said, will be a bit more nuanced than I liked it, I didn't like it, but that's the basic idea. Finally, why they say something. These ones are complicated, but let's do an example. Why does the woman give the example of a soft drinks manufacturer? So they're talking about surveys, as in a company has a survey to find the most popular soft drink, or a survey to find the most popular, do people prefer orange or lemon or lime soft drinks? They do a survey. Okay. What is this example telling us? Why is she doing it? To illustrate the difficulties of doing research using surveys. So surveys are difficult. Here's an example. To support an alternative approach to research based on surveys. So you don't have to do research on surveys. Here's an example from a soft drinks manufacturer to say why. To criticize the methods of research used in a particular survey. Oh, I heard one very bad survey from a soft drinks manufacturer where they did everything wrong. The method was bad. So this example, what is it doing? What purpose does it have? Here's what she says. One soft drinks manufacturer recently launched a project with the aim of improving recycling behaviour. Rather than use the customary strategy of a huge consumer survey, the daily lifestyles of small samples of people were observed closely. Then they were invited to get involved in problem-solving processes. Of course, it may turn out to be ineffective, but I'd like to learn more about the research findings. It's all still ongoing. Okay, this is quite vague. This requires some thought. Here you will have to listen to it, read it twice, 3 times, even I would. So what is this? Why is this survey? They didn't do a big survey. Instead, they used a small sample of people, and she'd like to find out more about it. She thinks, okay, this could be interesting. Well, is it about the difficulty of doing surveys? Not really. She's saying it may be ineffective, but that's not the same as she's saying all surveys are very difficult. It may be ineffective, but no. To support an alternative approach. Well, there's a bit of a key word here, isn't there? Alternative rather than. So it is an alternative approach, and she seems interested in it. She's supporting it. It's an alternative approach. And C, well, as I said, she's not really criticizing. She actually says this could be good. It might be good. We don't know. It might be good. So she's not criticizing this survey. So B is the best answer. There's quite a vague, abstract idea here, which I think makes it more difficult. But she's saying they did a survey in a different way, and I think it's interesting. She's supporting an alternative approach to surveys. So B is the best answer. That is what the example tells us. Skill, general understanding of why she's talking about this. Understand the situation. This survey was different, and it's interesting. An alternative approach. and she supports it. You understand the general situation. Okay, so those are your 4 question types that I think are the most common ones. If you can practice those, it will help on part 1. Let's do an exam. This is going to be like a traditional class. So what have you learned? Have you improved on the exam? Let's do an exam. Here's your first question. You have a few seconds to read it, and then I will play the audio. Go.
Extract 1. You hear 2 friends discussing the topic of reading books in printed or electronic form. Now look at questions 1 and 2.
What are you reading?
It's a novel. Quite gripping. Seeing me reading on my phone screen, you'd never know what it was, would you? Anyway, it's nothing too cultured. It being electronic is a plus if you don't want people to see easily what you're reading. I mean, if it isn't some great work of literature, but something a bit trashy.
E-books have cured my terrible habit. I tend to skip bits, especially if it's a thriller. I'll rush on maybe 20 pages from where I am in the plot, just to give myself an idea of the ending. It can really spoil it, though. But I haven't figured out how to do it on this electronic reader.
These electronic books sure beat carrying heavy books around. And if you decide you'd like a particular book, you can just get it immediately, as long as you have a Wi-Fi connection. Though there's something about turning the pages and having a book in my hand that feels right.
And if you love a book, it stays on your shelf like an old friend you can stop by and visit whenever you like.
Of course, e-books are always in your library too. They don't get battered like my most treasured paperbacks do.
Now listen again. Go back 40 seconds. Click the back button 10 times and you'll be back. And here are the answers. You've listened twice. You've got your 2 answers. Here are the answers and why. Well, number 1, she says she skips, she rushes on, meaning to go forward quickly, to get an idea of the ending, to see what will happen. That's B. And number 2, your old agreement question. Well, he says something about turning the pages that feels right. So this is like a pleasant feeling. It just feels nice to turn the pages. Oh, the paper, the smell, what an old boomer. And she says that it stays on yourself like an old friend you can visit. So it's, in general, pleasant, this idea of being pleasant. He says it's convenient, but she doesn't agree. And A is not really mentioned. So C, 2 questions, 2 marks. Extract 2.
Extract 1.
Extract 2. Again, take a few seconds to read it. And here comes extract 2.
Extract 2. You hear a woman telling a friend about a book he gave her. Now look at questions 3 and 4.
So, what did you think of the book I gave you?
The Man in the Forest? It was certainly an emotion-packed tale. There wasn't much about the man in the first half. I thought it got more gripping once he came into it more. I really identified with the main female character, the woman called Lucy. I can see why you thought it'd be my sort of thing, the blend of crime, mystery, and social issues. It was quite disturbing in parts, as you suggested it would be. I did wonder why they chose that cover for the paperback edition, though.
What? The picture of the key? I thought it's made the book look quite intriguing.
It doesn't really evoke the essence of what it's all about, though. The book's chief strength is as a tightly plotted thriller that also draws attention to certain social injustices. I mean, the image on the front cover has the potential to summarize the content, or at least highlight the issues the book tackles, which it totally missed doing. If it had done, I'd have been more convinced it was going to be the kind of thing I'm typically drawn to. Still, it sold over 10 million copies, so what do I know?
Now listen again, if you need to. Take the video back 1 minute and listen again. As you will in the exam, you will listen twice, of course. And the answers are A. Well, she said it was gripping I identified, it was disturbing. These are all her reactions. She barely mentions the plot, and she doesn't mention the behaviour. She mentions the main character, but not the behaviour. So it's C, it's her reaction. And number 4, the cover doesn't evoke the essence of what it's about. It fails to reflect its content. This is quite a clear synonym. The book sold well, but not, in her opinion, because of the cover. What does she know? She doesn't know the connection. And it's not really criticising the plot, no. So C and A, 2 more marks. I hope you did well. Last one, extract 3 on this topic of books. 2 writers talking about their daily routine. Read the questions. And here comes the audio.
Extract 3. You hear 2 writers talking about their daily routine. Now look at questions 5 and 6.
My day starts with a look at the papers.
Oh, really? I deal with emails before anything else.
Emails used to be exciting. Now it's all just stuff to clear. I'm pretty disciplined about checking them, but I find it doesn't hurt to switch off the internet most of the time. Although I sometimes need to consult it for reference. No, I start with the news and concentrate on the human interest stories. I couldn't make up that kind of thing, so why bother when I can get a spark of inspiration so easily?
I've been meaning to tell you. I've started to write standing, with my keyboard and mouse at waist height. I reason that being on my feet for hours is a form of exercise. I think it wards off all those nasty things that start happening in the body when you're seated. Though I'm probably kidding myself.
Well, I force myself to take a long walk in the afternoon, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't have a voice in my head reminding me that it's also good for my brain. To be honest, I jump at the chance to opt out, say if it's raining. If that's the case, I'll sometimes do some sit-ups indoors, but with a feeling of resignation.
Listen again. This one I think is difficult, so please listen again, even if you're just checking your answers. And here are the answers. Number 5, well, what does he say? He looks at the papers with the news, human interest stories. You couldn't make it up. It gives him a spark of inspiration. He's talking about getting plots from the newspapers. He doesn't look at the internet, but he doesn't avoid depending on it. He still uses the newspapers. So it's not about saying, no, I'm not using the internet. He uses it for reference only, not as stimulation. And number 6, this one's really difficult, but the clues are there. It's C. She is kidding herself about exercise, so as in she doesn't really think it works. She's not really convinced by it. It's necessary but unappealing. And he's doing it with a sense of resignation. He's forcing himself to do it. He doesn't really want to. He would rather stay at home, but he has to do it. So they're both unenthusiastic, unappealing, but they recognize you have to do it. So C is the best answer. Though it's a difficult one. They often are. Right, so that is part 1 of the listening.
Extract 3.
If you want to do any more practice, which of course you should be doing, because that's just a summary of how you do part 1 of what you should be listening for. Like, as I said, your introductory class. Now you know what it's like. Go and listen to other things. Go and do more practice. Thinking about the typical questions, how you answer them, how you get the answer. For today's video, we are recommending podcasts. They're these new things. They're like little radio programs that you can, you know what podcasts are. Find something you're interested in, listen to it. And the great thing is, the kind of things you will do in a podcast by following the story they're telling you, by identifying details, viewpoints, understanding jokes. These are the things that will help you with these common question types. Do they agree or disagree, the host and the guest? And what is the purpose of what they're saying? What are they trying to communicate? Opinions. Why this example or anecdote? It's all the same as the kind of questions you will have in part 1. So a good podcast and you'll be doing this. You should be listening as part of your daily routine. When walking to school, when doing the washing up, when cleaning the car, when making dinner. These are all perfect podcast listening times. I listen to so many podcasts each week. I'm subscribed to like 10 podcasts, and I easily listen to them every week, plus some in the archives. Today's recommendation is Well, There's Your Problem. It's a podcast about engineering disasters, where they look at, historical disasters like bridges falling down or boats sinking, buildings collapsing, and they talk about why it happened, how it happened, the impact of it, the consequences. They tell the human interest part of it, like people who died and people who tried to help, and it's a comedy podcast as well. They try and look at these things from a humorous perspective of saying how we can avoid these in the future, and it's a really interesting podcast. If you're interested in engineering or history or anything like that, well, there's your problem. And it's good for your C1 listening, which is what we're all about. So that's C1 Part 1. Hope you enjoyed. Keep practicing. Good luck. See you next time.